Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here and welcome back to the Recording in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about audio interface basics. So, audio interface basics. One critical part of your recording setup is your audio interface. It is the device that is going to allow you to get audio into your computer and out of your computer. It basically converts any sort of analog type signal, whether that be an instrument, a microphone, something like that, converts it into a digital signal to get into your computer so that the software can then record that to a hard drive or anything like that. Now, it also works in reverse. So it will also allow you to play back your audio from your computer out to your speakers. So it takes the digital signal that's being sent to it from the computer, converts it back into analog, and gets sent out to your speakers. Now, this sort of terminology is referred to as analog to digital conversion or digital to analog conversion, depending on which direction you're going in. And different devices do the same process, but some claim to do things a little bit more efficient than others, or a little bit cleaner and a little bit more pristine than others. But that all depends on what your quality you hear and the budget that you have. So assuming that you already have got your audio interface, or you've picked your audio interface, the first thing you obviously need to do is plug it into your computer. Now, depending on which model of audio interface you get will depend on how you plug that in. There's standard USB style ones, there's Thunderbolt, there's USB 3 if you want to categorize that as slightly different. There's also some legacy ones that are Firewire. Firewire is becoming less common these days. My audio interface is Firewire, but that's just because I haven't replaced it for a long time, because I'm happy with it. If you come across that, you may have some difficulty if your computer doesn't already support Firewire, so just keep that in mind. It's not the most common approach these days. And depending on the audio interface and the connection type, some of these can even be powered from that same connection, or they may be powered from a separate power supply. So if you have a little audio interface that has a USB connection, you might find that that can actually be powered from that USB connection and you don't need a separate power supply. But if you have a bigger unit that's got a lot more inputs and things like that, and it's running off say Thunderbolt or Firewire or whatever it is, or even USB, you might find that it requires that separate power supply to be able to function correctly and provide that capability. So depending on whether you are looking for this to be mobile as well as in your studio, or just studio based, may determine that, because if you're going to be mobile, you may want that unit to be able to be powered from USB. So just keep that in mind if you haven't already purchased your audio interface. So once you plug your audio interface into your computer, most likely, or a lot of them, are going to require you to install some software. That software may have come in the box on a CD, or you may have to download it from the internet. Downloading from the internet is a lot more common these days. It saves price on burning CDs and putting them in a box and all that sort of stuff. So it's usually the most common approach. And even if you do get a CD, I always recommend that you go online to the manufacturer's site anyway and download their latest version, because what's on the CD could be an old version that's full of bugs, and they don't send out new versions on the CDs once they've already been pressed. So it's a good idea to go to the site and get the new version of software. So, installing software is basically like installing any other software, and as long as it detects the audio interface and sets it all up, it's going to basically set that up into your operating system, whether that's Windows or Mac, and it's going to then set it all up so it's going to allow your software operating system to accept it as an input device and as an output device for your sound. All right, so once you've got your audio interface plugged in and software installed on a Windows system, you can check a couple of locations to see that it's actually there and make sure it seems like it's working. In a Mac, you'll have a similar approach, but I don't have a Mac to show you, so I can't actually guide you through where to look, but there'll be something similar in that regard. So on Windows here, I've just opened up Device Manager. You can usually get to the Device Manager by right-clicking on the Start button at the bottom of your window, and then just on the menu, you'll see Device Manager. And you'll see here, there's a few locations for my device because it is a UAD Apollo. It also has some DSP accelerator, so I can see it appear here under that section as well. But we can also see it appear under our audio inputs and outputs. Universal Apollo there. And potentially we can also see it under our sound, video and game controller section here, Universal Apollo. So the other place we can find it is usually in our audio settings. This is the new layout in Windows 10 that I don't really like, but you'll see on a drop down here for input, I have Universal Audio as an option. On my output, again, you can see there it says Speakers, Universal Audio Apollo. And in the old traditional window that you can still get to in Windows 10, but used to be the old one, you can see here under Playback, we have Speakers, Universal Audio, and Recording again, we have Universal Audio. And you can see the meter moving at the moment because that is me talking into this microphone, into my Universal Audio Apollo. So in my case here, having the UAD Apollo, the software that I install is a full console view, as you can see here on the screen. And there's lots of different settings that I can use for the inputs and outputs, etc., which we'll go through in more depth as we actually set things up and start recording. But at the moment, you can just get a visual guide that, you know, I had some software that had to be installed, and there's a good chance you will as well. And you may end up with a view like this as well, or your interface may not have something like this, and you're just using your recording software to determine all of that. So there's lots of different sizes and types of audio interfaces, and as I've discussed in my setting up a home music studio, that's obviously something you need to factor in if you haven't already got one, of how many inputs, how many outputs, how many headphone outputs do you require for your setup and your studio and what you're actually going to be doing. This is going to be based on the instrumentation you record, how many things you record at the same time, whether you're recording entire bands or it's just you by yourself recording one instrument at a time. That's going to dictate a lot on what that audio interface is about and, you know, what size it is. What brand it is, that can be just up to you. You know, there's lots of reputable brands out there, and they all do a great job these days. So it's all about finding the one that you think is the best, the one that has the best recommendations, whatever it is, and one that fits into your budget. Now, as discussed in the previous video, these audio interfaces are going to have lots of different types of connectors, you know, and it depends on what audio interface you get again, and this is up to you to decide that based on what your needs are. There's going to be ones that are going to have one or multiple microphone inputs. Some are going to have the TS style inputs for direct cables of guitars and bass and whatever else. Some may have MIDI, old style, DIN style MIDI inputs. Some may have multiple headphone outputs or one headphone output. Some may have multiple speaker outputs, or again, one speaker output. So again, it's all about what you need here. I can't tell you what model to get. I can't tell you what you exactly need without knowing what you're going to be using it for and where you want to go in the future as well, because your growth may dictate that you might want to get a bigger, better model now to allow for that growth, or it may not. You may be fine with a smaller version that just satisfies exactly what you need. So on the audio interface, there are some main controls that I'm just going to briefly mention in this video, but we're going to go into more depth in the next video. So one of these controls may be a high pass filter, also known as a low cut filter. There's also phantom power or 48 volt. There's obviously your headphone volumes. There's your gain control on each input, and there's also, it could have a phase button, and then there's also the main volume that could control the entire volume of the whole unit. Some units also have a pad button as well to knock the volume down of the input. There's also some key critical settings and functions within the software and control of that audio interface that we're going to discuss in the next couple of videos. And they can be things like the bit depth, the sample rate, things like direct monitoring and buffer size. And again, we'll go through that in greater depth in the next video or two. So that gives you a brief overview of the audio interface basics. Let me know if you have any questions. Please feel free to put them in the comments below. Obviously, as I said, we're going to go into greater depth in the next video. So, check out that before you get into the questions, because some of the questions may be answered in that video. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.